Good morning to you,
Good morning.
Mr. Raab. Thank you very much for being with us. So I've laid out some of the plans there. Just give us some more detail why you've decided to toughen these sentencing guidelines.
Well, we've published the Wade Review, as you mentioned. There are a whole range of recommendations. We'll report and answer all of them in the summer. But I can tell you three things right now. We think in the case of domestic murders, obviously predominantly men against women, where there's a history of controlling and coercive behaviour, we think the sentences should be increased to reflect that slow torment on top of the severity of the crime. We'll introduce immediately a statutory aggravating factor that can lift sentences by anything up to 2 years or even more. That depends on what a court decides. And I will also consult on a starting point of 25 years in those cases. On top of that, in relation to overkill and the so-called rough sex defence, we're going to also increase the sentences. In relation to the latter, I'll write to the Sentencing Council because it's their prerogative. And ultimately, in all of this, I want men who commit these awful crimes to spend longer behind bars, and I want women to feel more confident that the justice system is on their side and reflecting the full, appalling nature of the crimes that they suffer.
Yeah, and this has been warmly welcomed by groups that work with this. I'm sure that they're happy that you're going further. There are other parts to this as well, though. I do want to ask you a little bit about something that's in the Domestic Abuse Act that allows perpetrators to cross-examine partners in relationships in courts. Charities have written you asking you to ban that practice. Is that something you're going to push forward on?
I always look at these things, and for example, in relation to rape, we introduced pre-recorded video evidence. I think you have to be careful that you allow the evidence to be tested, but with the extra money we're putting into victim support, I quadrupled it since 2010, and with the other measures that we're taking, we want to try and make the experience of victims and witnesses in court as sensitive as we can, A, because we owe them a moral duty of care, but also because we're more likely to secure convictions that way.
Yeah, and just finally on this as well, and slightly related, after the murder of Zara Lena and the sentencing of Jordan McSweeney last year, he didn't come up to court to hear the final judgment, and you said at the time that you might force judges to bring these people up. Is that something you're going to push forward on?
That's definitely something I'm looking at. I think both as a matter of respect and recognition of the bereaved of victims, but also, frankly, respect for the principle of British justice. I think we should look at making it an aggravating factor in sentencing if an individual committed one of these heinous crimes just snubs the court.
OK. And Mr. Raab, while I've got you here, you will have seen the reporting from our political editor yesterday, Beth Rigby, about allegations that you're facing about your conduct with some of your colleagues. You've been accused of being a bully. How do you answer those allegations this morning?
Well, as you know from previous questions that have been put to me, I've said that I would cooperate fully with the inquiry. I'm not going to comment on anonymous sources in the media. In fact, it's a breach of the rules of the inquiry for anyone to do so, and of course I want to respect that.
I want to just show you what's been said. I know you said they're anonymous sources. We have voiced them up. These are people that Beth has spoken to, and here is one of the allegations there. He created an awful atmosphere. It was coercive behaviour. He had people in tears after coming out of his office, but they wouldn't complain. Do you recognise that? Well,
as I just said to you, and you know I'm going to say this, it's actually improper for me to comment on the question you've just asked. It's a breach of the rules of the inquiry. Anyone involved in the inquiry who is commenting to the media, anonymously or otherwise, is breaching the rules, and as a matter of basic professional integrity, I'm not going to do that.
Fine. So, as a professional integrity, do you think it's important that the people you work with like working with you?
Look, of course you want to have a positive relationship with the vast majority of people that I do. That's the case, but I'm not going to comment on the allegations or the claims. As I said to you before, and I've answered questions on Sky News before, it's actually improper for anyone who's involved in the inquiry to comment on it with the media.
I know, I appreciate it, but I'm talking about
I'm not sure you quite do. You want to ask your questions anyway.
Do, but I'm talking about it more broadly, more philosophically, because, you know, we all work in organisations, and sometimes you work with people you don't quite get on with. I'm saying, do you think you should always be, friendly with those that you work with, or is there space there to, not to get on?
Look, what I'd say is a professional relationship, particularly between politicians and civil servants, what you want to do is be bigger than the sum of your parts. There's a really important piece around candid advice, full advice from civil servants, and ultimately when ministers decide and offer ministerial challenge, that's important too. You want to try and get the best of both of those elements.
Do you set very high standards for the people that work with you?
Absolutely.
the highest of standards, and that could be difficult to meet sometimes, would you say?
Look, I think if you're in any walk of life, in the media, in sport, in CEO of a big business, let alone in government, you want to set high standards because that's where you deliver. And look, if you think about the stuff we're talking about today, delivering for the victims of these appalling crimes, I think it's right just to remember that we all serve the British public. And in my case, dealing with the MOJ, I'm serving victims and bereaved of some of the most appalling crimes. Of course, I'm going to do everything I can to drive the reforms that we've been able to announce today and in other areas as well.
And last thing on this, you said to Sophie a little while ago that you'd resign if you were found guilty of it. Is that still the case?
Look, I haven't changed the view I've taken on it, but I'm not commenting further.
OK. I want to bring you on to the review into the Met.
Yes.
It's reported this morning that there's going to be some really concerning, critical reporting coming out about the Met next week. I mean, that force has already got to get its house in order. Mark Rowley said they're going to expect weekly revelations about it. What's to be done about that?
Well, look, I'm not going to get ahead of the Casey report, but look, we want a no-hold-bars review. We want to look at this as critically as we possibly can. I know Commissioner Rowley, who I know well, he was Chief Constable of Surrey Police before becoming a Met Commissioner, is already conducting a range of checks, for example, on vetting and existing checks. So we will embrace and engage with any of those findings because we want to get this right. We want to be proud of our police forces. I think the vast majority of police officers do an incredible job, but clearly these terrible things that have happened in the past must be addressed and people must be able to have confidence. You know, I've been talking about the sentencing for murder and domestic abuse cases against women. Well, it's the same with policing. We want women across this country to know that the law enforcement authorities right across the board are on their side, working for them and are protecting them, not posing a threat to them.
Appreciate your time this morning. I've got a couple more questions for you. Strikes now,
Sure.
if we can. It seems as if they're finally getting somewhere with the strikes. There's a deal on the table. Why did it take so long?
Well, look, I don't think it's at this point where we're on the cusp of hopefully getting a settlement. I don't think there's much value in just finger-pointing. But what I would say is I think that the Health Secretary's done a great job and it's good that the vast majority of the NHS unions have backed the latest settlement. We, of course, would hope that the BMA would follow suit in relation to junior doctors. But the critical thing is the fairness that we, of course, want for nurses, doctors and other medical staff without creating the extra pressure on inflation. We've just seen from the OBR this week with the budget, inflation coming down. Yeah. We've got to make sure we get the right balance between those two things.
Where's the extra money coming from, then?
Well, it'll have to come from within the budgets that
so within existing budgets, not coming from outside?
Well, that'll be for the Health Secretary to set out the details of. But we've announced the budget. The Chancellor announced the budget this week. I think it was an excellent budget for business. You can see that our plan is working. Inflation scheduled now to come down to 2.9% from the peak of 11%. The economy growing this year. The fears of recession have abated in terms of what the OBR is predicting. And I think a really good package for business, £25 billion of tax cuts, but also things like extending the child allowance for mums of 9-month-old to 4-year-old
Which is
children.
a bit sooner for my baby, who's 2.
We've got you and many others, particularly on lower incomes, may I say, squarely in our focus.
Excellent stuff. Deputy Prime Minister and Justice Secretary Dominic Raab, thank you very much for your time.
Good to talk to you.
Good to have you with us. Thank you.